All right, welcome everybody. My name is Winnie, and I have Cartessa with
And I'm
me.
Cartessa.
Hi,
Hello.
Cartessa. So this is
Hi.
Racial Perceptions, and this is episode number 2, where we're gonna keep talking
Yes,
about white privilege.
yes. I'm super excited about it. I'm super excited to be here. I wanted to start by saying that I really liked the conversations that
Yeah.
were prompted from last week and the
Hmm.
response that we've been getting from that. I think that that's amazing.
Yeah.
I think that it's what we wanted. So
Hmm.
I'm very happy
Absolutely.
for that. I'm very
Yeah.
happy for
But yeah. It was definitely, a little bit nerve-wracking to kind of
that. Oh,
start the conversation. But I think seeing people's responses and the conversations that I know for me personally that I've been having throughout the week last week, it's been pretty exciting. So, like I said, we're going to keep talking about white privilege today. And I would really love it if our viewers could really interact with us and share their thoughts and their perspectives. We have a specific question
yes.
that we're going to be focusing on today. So I'll let Cartessa talk a little bit more about that question.
Okay. Well, you and I had a discussion and we wanted to be more interactive with the question of why is white privilege not um, sort of universally known and accepted?
Hmm.
Like why do we have certain areas where white privilege can be recognized, and then certain areas where it cannot, and
Hmm.
it is not. I think that we had some very good points. You and I were talking about the sundown town phenomenon
Right.
from literature that you were reading.
Hmm.
And I just thought that that was so fascinating and very, and we were talking about it's very prevalent to this day.
Hmm.
There are
Hmm.
still towns that have that sort of mentality where they don't want people of color
Hmm. Hmm.
living there and
Yeah. So
cohabitating with them.
Yeah, so for our viewers who are not very familiar with what a sundown town is, it's basically a town where Black people and other people of color were not welcome in the town or in the community. And this is a phenomenon that myself I have observed driving across the Midwest and driving to Alaska. We've driven through a lot of very interesting, smaller towns, and even the different states where the population is pretty much white. Like there's not a lot of
Right.
diversity in it and whatnot. And so for a lot of those sundown towns, what would happen is if a Black person, specifically Black people, but um, other people were included in that population too, but specifically for Black people, if you were caught in that sundown town after sundown, so if nightfall um, caught you in that town, bad things could happen to you. Where
It was
um,
dangerous. It's
yeah, like
dangerous.
your life was basically in danger, where the residents of that town, the white residents of that town, could really just do whatever they wanted to you if you were caught in the town after sundown. And for a lot of the Black folks, I mean, their homes were burned, they got beaten up, they got lynched. I mean, y- you think about
Name
it,
it. Yeah.
yeah, like, you name it, it probably happened to them. So that's what the sundown towns are. And even though today it's not as bad as it was back then, to where they're lynching people or doing all that stuff anymore, but they're still very much prevalent. And I
Yeah.
think it's very interesting because a lot of my white friends and white colleagues that I have talked to, and I've asked them, have you ever thought about this? And have you ever wondered why there's not a lot of diversity where you live? And they're usually like, well, that's just how it is. Like that's home. So,
I never really thought about
yeah,
it.
like,
Yeah,
I never really thought about that. So, I think that's very interesting because I think in order for the concept of white privilege to even be accepted in this country, people have to be aware that where you're living, there's not a lot of diversity in it, and there's a reason for that. Like there's a
right,
history of racial policies that have kept Black people out of these communities, that have kept, people of color out of these communities. And even if you look at some of the suburban neighborhoods, and there's a lot of quote unquote white neighborhoods, and a lot of it is based off of that same policy. And
right.
these policies, I think a lot of times, of course, they're unwritten, but there's this rule that, hey, we want our town, we want our subdivisions, we want our neighborhoods to look a certain way, and we're going to do everything we can to keep them the way that they are. And
Mhm.
if an outsider wants to come in, then we're going to make life hard for them. We're going to run them out of
Exactly,
the neighborhood.
exactly,
We're going to
and
run
there's
them out of town.
very few repercussions for that. There's very
Mhm,
few, instances where you have a Black family, or someone that's of a different race other than
mhm,
white move into one of these areas and have full support from the police or the law enforcement area, or councilmen,
mhm.
because it is such a deep rooted
Right.
unwritten rule. So
Mhm,
you have these people, and I mean, they're living miserably. It's not. There are still people to this day that are living in towns that are African American. They're living in towns or suburbs that are predominantly white, and they
mhm,
struggle with neighbors or with
mhm.
the environment outside of their small neighborhood,
Right.
and it goes unchecked. I mean, almost completely,
Mhm,
and we can't acknowledge that as a privilege. We can't acknowledge that as a racial disparity, which
mhm,
is unfortunate. And it just goes right back into that systemic stuff of perception. Like your perception is saying that you should be allowed to live in a community
mhm.
with people like mind and that look like you. That is not the country that we live in. And this is supposed to be an all-inclusive
Mhm.
country under God,
Right.
indivisible. So you look at this and you're like, "Oh, for that person to think that, for that person to think that they should be able to have that privilege,
Mhm.
then that's an entitlement that you. How are you going to fight that? How are you going to address that? How are you going
Right.
to, because okay, so like you were saying earlier, Winnie, these people really feel like it's their right, you know.
Mhm,
And I think that that's fine. That you have your right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of
mhm,
happiness. However, you do not have the right to infringe upon someone else. And we've had
mhm,
centuries of infringement on human rights
mhm.
just because of the color of their skin.
Right.
And at this point, we can't even get an acknowledgement to say, well, hey, this is a entitlement that I have today,
Mhm.
2020. That's
Yeah,
racist.
and this really brings in the question of, how can people recognize something as an issue if they're not even aware of it? Um,
Right.
because I think that for a lot of the people that I've had personal conversations with, it's usually this thing about, oh, like I didn't even think about that. Like that didn't
Yeah.
even cross my mind.
Yes.
So it's this concept, I guess, of, well, this is how things have always been. So this is how I grew up. This is
Yeah.
how, the town or the city, the state, that's how we've always done things. So there's part of this pattern of um we don't need to question it because that's how it's always been. And
Yeah. It's
on the
ingrained.
right, and on the flip side of that, I've also talked to people who have recognized a lot of these things, but they're in the minority in terms of the way that they think. So there's also kind of this fear that if we speak up, if we say something, then um, our neighbors or our family members, whoever, might think that we're aligned with this group of people. So it's kind of like, in the older days where they would call the white people who would speak up against some of the racial injustices and stuff, they would call them um, n- nigger lovers. Um, so a lot of people
And I
that
bet that that's a term that's still widely used. I
yeah,
bet that's a
it's
term
so
that's still
widely
widely
used.
used.
Right. And so I think for a lot of people, who are really aligned with trying to make sure that everyone's rights are respected for this fight for equality and racial justice and everything like that, some people I think are genuinely uncomfortable and afraid to speak up and let their voices be heard because they don't want to be called um the nigger lover.
Yeah. Yes,
So,
very true. I'm
yeah,
very
like
proud of you for, being brave enough to say what you mean and you feel. That's a term
yeah,
that
and
it
I
might be uncomfortable, but that's a term
really
that we have
uncomfortable
to
for
deal
me
with
to say
that is.
it. Mhm.
Yeah,
But,
absolutely.
and I want our viewers when, you're watching this, you're rewatching, the replay to understand where I'm coming from when I use that term, because I think it is a term that is very uncomfortable for a lot of people, and, like, even as a Black person, it's uncomfortable for me to say it because I know where that term came from. I know
Yeah,
the history of it,
yes,
so it's really
yes,
uncomfortable.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, and I like to when I hear that term, it makes me think of, um it makes me uncomfortable because
Mhm.
it's like,
Very much
are you saying that term, or are you calling them that term because for instance, if they didn't have that friend that was Black, or if they didn't have that spouse that was Black or whatever, then you feel like they wouldn't feel that way or
mhm.
wouldn't be speaking out because that's something that is, I mean, that's upsetting as
Right.
well. That's not something, and it can go, the term,
Right, right.
nigger lover is so offensive. It's almost offensive as a derogatory term, nigger.
Mhm.
So it's it's something that I have multi-layered faucets about, like that
Mhm.
family, that perspective, that
Mhm.
family member or that friend is saying, oh, well, you're this because I know for a fact if you hadn't had this relationship or this experience that you wouldn't feel this way or that you wouldn't be stepping out against, you know, um,
Mhm.
racial discrimination. And that in itself is something that, should be addressed.
Right.
It's not something that, um, you speaking out against discrimination and racial injustice isn't something that's easy to do.
It's
Um,
not at all.
so absolutely,
Especially when you're in a community where people basically think the same way, there's not necessarily leeway for people to have different opinions.
right,
Sharing yours and taking a stand can definitely be very uncomfortable.
it can, it
Mhm.
can, and I think back to, the privilege, you know what I mean? Like why that person that can say that derogatory term, like what makes them think that they have that right to do that? What makes
Mhm.
them think that they could say something to someone else
Mhm.
know, to just, just out of just to hurt them.
Right.
Um, and clinically. like, in the mental health profession, I
Mhm.
would, have to look at all the perspectives about it, but what would make that so what is recognizing white privilege and becoming aware of it, what is it about that term and doing it that makes it so difficult? Is it the
Mhm.
constant work? Is it the constant having to be aware of your biases and
Mhm.
your stereotypes that you have against people? Um, is it the fear of not
Mhm.
really, knowing what could happen if you give up certain do you feel if you're gonna give up certain privileges that, someone else is gonna get them and now it's gonna be skewed against
You're not
you?
gonna have it anymore.
Yeah, like, I mean, I really, have, like, banged my head up against the wall,
Mhm.
thinking about the different types of, reasons why people wouldn't want to speak out against racial injustice.
Mhm.
I had a friend
Mhm.
that's a teacher, and she's an English teacher in a small town in Kansas, and so she been friends with her for years, and um, we had a conversation years ago. And I said, why aren't you speaking out more about, I guess I was pressuring her. I
Mhm.
was like, why
Mhm.
are you not speaking out more about what's going on? This was back in the Trayvon Martin era,
Okay.
you know?
Mhm.
So, and she's like, I have to do it this way. As a
Mhm.
teacher, I could get in trouble for speaking out,
Mhm.
or I could get, ostracized. And this is a
Mhm.
white woman living
Mhm.
in a white town. And
Yeah,
so
and
I
I mean,
understood that.
that's a real fear. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a real fear that
Yeah.
people have, and I think that, it's completely valid, that
Yes.
people have that fear. Someone says that maybe, it's entitlement. Thank you, Kai Brown, for sharing your comment with us, and I think that that kinda speaks to what you were talking about, in terms of, when somebody has a certain right or you have um a certain type of privilege and it's hard, to give it up, you get a sense of entitlement to it and you don't want to give it up. And it's not even about like giving it up. It's about, recognizing that you have this privilege and, you can use this privilege that you have to help
Help
someone else,
other people.
to
Help
to
other
to
people.
stand with someone, right.
Yeah, and help move them forward. You and Sergeant Brown, good to see you. You have the ability to include, be inclusive, and no
Mhm,
matter what your privilege is, you have that ability to use it um to defer someone or to help
mhm,
them lift them up. And
mhm,
the pain and the divisiveness is coming out of this whole white privilege scenario is that people
mhm,
are using white privilege to
mhm,
promote their own agenda, their
right.
entitlement to promote their own agenda. And that's not right. That's not
Mhm,
right.
mhm,
It's not okay. And where do we get to a point where we say enough is enough? Do we have to
right.
protest in the streets? Because that's what's happening. Do
Mhm,
we have to um, make the whole country into this one side against the other?
mhm,
To get it to to get the point across? Because that's what's happening.
mhm,
We're not,
mhm.
and as mental health professionals, you and I both know that this is terrible what's going on. This is
Yeah,
awful,
yeah, it's
and
affecting
if
everybody.
we could get, yeah, it's devastating. If we could
Mhm,
get to a point where we could get people to recognize that every day you're going to have to look at yourself and look at your actions and your thoughts and your behaviors, and you're going to have to make sure that that's not infringing on someone
mhm,
else.
mhm, mhm,
And that's something that I don't know ever if
mhm,
we could get to. Like, we would have to put every single person on the couch and
mhm.
then just go. And
Yeah,
then when we're done, we would have to get, as clinicians, we would have to get on the couch ourselves.
Yeah, for real.
So, you know,
Um, yeah, I had a conversation with a colleague of mine a few weeks ago, and we were talking about a lot of these things, like the racial stuff, just different perceptions and everything that's going on, and how it affects us in the mental health field, and everything like that. And she said one thing that really stuck with me, and that I appreciated hearing from a white colleague of mine. She said that she really wishes that everyone had the opportunity to be a minority in whatever situation, maybe, like at work, at school, where they live,
yes,
whatever. She
yes,
said she really wishes that everybody had the opportunity to be a minority, to have
I would
that
love that.
experience,
I would
because she
love
said
that.
that she really feels like if everybody had that experience, then um, they would be able to have more empathy and to really understand where other people are coming from. Because I think most of the time we are not like, I know that for me personally, like when I have these conversations with people, I'm not asking anybody to apologize to me. Like, I'm not trying to make anyone feel guilty. Like,
Right.
that's not what it is at all. Like, we're having a
No, no.
conversation,
We're
and
trying to
we're
move
trying to
forward.
understand, right, trying to move
Yeah.
forward. And so I really like that she said that. I actually told her that I was gonna quote her tonight. So if you're watching, I quoted you. I don't want to say her name because I didn't tell her if I was gonna say her name or not. But yeah, that just really stuck with me, because I was like, yeah, like that is absolutely it. And for her, the reason that she was able to say that is because she's had those experiences. She's had the experience of being the only white girl in her class, and living in a community where there wasn't, a lot of white people, or white people weren't the majority. So she's had these
Yes,
experiences,
yes,
and she's experienced, how she felt, like how awkward it was, and like all these different um feelings that you get as being the minority, like when you go to work. And you and I were actually talking about this when we met at work in Missouri. We were like, oh, another black
right.
person.
Oh my God. Okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
so
Yes.
if people were able to understand that, I think that our conversations in general would be much more empathetic, and we would be able to move forward. Um, so yeah, like I just really like that. I like
Yeah,
that she said
I
that.
think that that's an amazing idea, and I've wished many times, like, especially, like, with close friends of mine, I see, Rayanne, she said, "It seems like there should be enough to go around, so it's confusing when you're being told that you're privileged," and, I think that her perspective is that of her life and her visions and her experiences. And
Mhm.
so if I say, well, how about you be a black woman for a month, you know? And then let's go back and let's talk about how, your experiences are then,
Mhm.
or how you feel then about
Mhm.
the equity of um the entitlement and the privilege that
Mhm.
goes on. I would just be so interested in seeing how that would work out, or
Mhm.
so fascinated to see how that would work out. Me myself, like I would be a little nervous, but I would take on that challenge, and I would be a white woman for a month
Mhm.
or a week. I don't
Mhm.
know. But I would take on that challenge, and I would try to, embrace it so I could understand, what the perspective is. And
Right,
then, I would be able to have better input into, at someone that doesn't see something as a problem, um, is not going to see it as a problem if it's not a problem to
right,
them.
right, right. And that
So,
again goes back to our question tonight, why is it that white privilege as a concept is not really accepted um, in our culture and in this country, in this society, and why is it so divisive? And again, I think if you're not aware of something, y- you can't do anything about it. You don't recognize it. You can't, um, acknowledge it. I mean, um it's just not there. You just don't recognize it. So,
and even
um
as
with
we're
it
going through this
mhm,
whole I'm sorry, even as we're going through this whole situation right now, like it's just the devastating news. Like yesterday with Breonna Taylor,
mhm,
just the whole situation that's happening right now. It's getting riled up. The country's getting riled up, and it's not gonna be pleasant.
mhm,
Um, the protests are happening. I know for a fact that I'm going to have colleagues and friends that aren't going to understand what BLM is doing and why they're so upset, you know?
mhm.
And it makes me sad because I wish that they would be able to have that open perception
Right.
and be
Mhm,
willing to listen and learn and critique and be critiqued. I
mhm,
know like, you know, maybe hearing the some things about you that you don't necessarily want to hear. And I want to thank another counselor, LPC, Lynn Davidson, if she's out there. She gave me a coming to Jesus one time, really about, my racist remarks and how
mhm.
I was being biased. And I resonated because I want to know, I want to learn, and I want to be a part of the solution. I want
Mhm.
to make
Right.
solutions, and that's what I want to do. So I thank her, all
Mhm.
the time for that. And it just breaks my heart to see where we're going and
Right.
to see that we can't properly, explain this, and we have children out here that are watching this,
Yeah.
you know, they don't understand what we're doing.
Mhm.
But before
Oh.
long, they're going to be on one side or the other.
Mhm.
It's going to be
Mhm.
continual.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know.
It's definitely a lot for sure. And I mean, I don't know what the solution is besides, hey, let's try to have conversations about these things. Let's try to listen to each other, try to understand, try to put yourself in someone else's shoes.
Right.
And, let's learn together. And I also want to piggyback off of what you were saying in terms of, being called out with racist remarks that you made. I want to say, like, when I have these conversations with people, I say, like, when I'm having these discussions, I'm not saying that, oh, it's just the white people who are racist and
Yes.
black people are racist. That's
Right.
not true at all.
Ooh.
I've actually
Ooh.
met I've actually met, some Black people who were more racist, like,
Yes.
way more racist
Yes.
than,
And what I
some of
find
the
that I do with that is that
mhm,
and it's a problem that I have to work on. African Americans, African American men, African American women, I don't tend to hold them to that standard that I would hold someone white. So if
mhm,
someone was like made a racial comment and they were African American, my bias would and I've been working on this. So I have
mhm,
had those tough conversations. Um, but my bias would be like, "Oh, well, they're Black,
Mhm.
so they've had that
Yeah,
they've
like
had those."
they're kind of justified to feel the way that
Yeah, they've had those experiences, they
Mhm.
know, they've lived through it,
Mhm.
and, more often than not, they've had multiple issues of racial
Mhm.
discrimination, so, I can get
Mhm.
how they're a little tainted or a lot tainted. So,
Mhm.
and yet a white person can say, "Well, I I was I was, beat up by a Black person, and,
Mhm.
I could be quick to say that doesn't mean that all Black people are going to beat you
Just
up,
do it.
don't
Mhm.
be racist, you know,
Mhm.
person."
Mhm.
So that's something that, I have to work on indeed. And racial perceptions is what we're trying to put out there,
Mhm.
like, you and I are coming out here and we're being vulnerable. We're
Mhm.
being open. We want to have these dialogues.
Mhm.
So it's not coming to look at someone, that's a perfect patty that's going to tell you everything that you should
No.
do and, good for you. No, we're going to come and we're going to discuss, how we feel as Black
Mhm.
women. We have a perspective. We
Mhm.
want you guys to discuss with us what
Mhm.
your perspective is as a white person, as a white woman, as a white
Mhm.
man, as, a Black man.
Mhm.
Because we want to get those hard topics out there,
Right. Right.
and
Yeah.
I think that we're able to do that in a situation, because of our background and, our profession. I think that we
Mhm.
can do that in a situation to keep everyone emotionally safe
Mhm. Mhm.
and supported while
Right.
still having that tough
Right.
conversation.
Right. And
So
that's the goal of all of this is for us to provide everybody, ourselves included, with a space and a platform where we can have these conversations. We can look at these things, and it's just there's such a broad way of looking at all these things, and there's different perceptions and kind of like you said, like we are all dealing with this stuff. Like we're working through it. I mean, I'm working through it. I
right,
have my own biases and as a therapist, as someone in the mental health, like I have to constantly keep myself in check and to not, just jump to judgment and to try to
yeah,
understand
yeah,
where the other person is coming from. And something that I heard recently that also resonated with me a lot is, like when we're hearing people's stories and when we're looking at people's reactions to different things, a lot of the times we just tend to just judge and just call this person out and just be rude and disrespectful. But if we take the time to ask what happened to this person, what happened in this person's life that's making them react that way, I think that that'll open up the door, for us to have a very meaningful conversation,
right.
without judgment and where, everyone can be heard and understood because we don't always know the whole story. Most of the time we don't. We just see what's on the surface. We don't know what happened. And,
Yes.
going back to our original question, about white privilege and why it's not a widely accepted, concept. Well, if you were born and raised in a community that didn't have a lot of diversity, I mean, can I really hold you accountable for
Exactly.
not knowing that there's a whole world out there with different
Exactly.
people, different cultures and everything like that? I mean,
Exactly.
I guess yes and no, like, once you get to a certain point in your life, I think that, people should be able to do the self-reflection and start asking these questions and whatnot, but
You
I don't
definitely
think
wanna
that
hold them accountable if they're hurting someone else. Like, if they're
Right.
infringing on
Right, right,
someone
right.
else,
Right,
then
absolutely.
that's, like, my boundary. But like you're
Right.
right. How do I,
But
if you
my
come in
question
and
is
you
right.
go ahead.
My
I'm
question
listening.
is, like, what happened to this person that, they really cannot understand that, "Hey, this is something that is very hurtful, that can be detrimental to a lot of people." What happened? So I think that when I look at it that way and going back, to the sundown towns that we were talking about, most people aren't even aware that that's a thing. So if you have this person who grew up, in this not very diverse community, everybody looks like them, and the only interactions that they've had with Black people or other people of color are from, the media, what they're seeing
Right.
in movies and TV shows and everything like that. Well, their perception of who I am when they see me as a Black person is already
Huge.
twisted right
Yeah.
there. Like it's already
Yeah.
skewed because they've seen this mad Black woman on TV, and so they assume that we're all the same. So
Yes.
that for me, being able to understand that and being able to understand, this phenomenon, this sundown town phenomenon, like that has really helped me to be empathetic towards a lot of white people who weren't aware that this was a thing. And I think that coming at it that way has opened up a door for us to have conversations about these things for the people who are willing to
Yeah,
have
for the
these
people that are willing.
conversations.
And
Hmm.
just, if we can get more and more people at least willing to listen, and I that is probably like my our biggest barrier is going to
Hmm.
be getting people to just listen and accept
Hmm.
the things about themselves that they might not necessarily like.
Hmm.
Being vulnerable is hard. Being
Yes.
vulnerable is hard.
Oh my
Now,
gosh.
I definitely have boundaries, and I can definitely be defensive, and I can definitely be like, okay, well, this is where I'm I'm done with
Hmm.
this conversation. But I have no problem, being vulnerable and wanting to
Hmm.
know what the issue is, and
Hmm.
wanting to know what can be done to fix it, or
Hmm.
whatever. And so I think that at this point I'm at a place where I want to know what can be done. I
Hmm.
want to know if it could be fixed, or if there's anything that I could do, the smallest thing that I could do. Especially with you,
Hmm.
fortunately that I have you as a co-conspirator. But
Yeah,
I think
we've been talking about a lot of hard stuff. So,
yeah, and I think that that's great, and I think
mhm,
that if we can just get, every time, if we can just get someone to just kind of
mhm.
understand that when we say hard stuff, when a therapist says hard stuff, they mean hard stuff. They don't
It's
mean,
hard, and it's hard for us
yeah,
too.
it's not going to be fun. You're not going to
Mhm,
necessarily like it, but it's in a safe environment. A
mhm,
therapist or clinician's first right to their patient is not only privacy but to do them no harm.
mhm. Right.
So that is something that in this avenue, you and I both are bringing that into this environment. Like,
Mhm,
yes, we have to talk about these things
mhm,
that you might not want to recognize, viewers out there, or you might recognize and just don't want to talk about it. However, I encourage you to come
mhm,
forward and let us know. I saw this. I was told one time that um, I think it's Mildred.
mhm.
Forgive me if I'm misspelling that or if I'm mispronouncing that.
Yeah.
I was
No.
told one time that Black people cannot be racist because they didn't create the system of oppression. And what you see is a reaction of a system that is set up. So,
I think that she's referring to what you were saying in terms of, you being able to understand, like, if a Black person says something that's racist or they're acting
right.
that's racist,
Absolutely. But I
you
absolutely agree
you kind of
with that.
automatically go to that place of, "Oh, I get it." Um, and
Yeah.
at the same time, I think that to a certain extent, we have to give white people that grace too, especially the people that we're interacting with, our viewers. We don't necessarily know your stories and your experiences and everything like that. Maybe there's something that happened in your life that really skewed your perspective of Black people and of people of color. And hey, whatever you feel, it's valid. It's valid. We just want to have the conversation. Let's talk about
Yes.
it. Let's move forward
Yeah. Tell
instead
me,
of.
Mildred, do you agree with that? Did you, when she told you that, or whoever told you that statement, was that something that you agreed with? Was it something that, caused you some turmoil? Is that something that you would like to talk about, like to see our opinions on it? I mean, these are the kind of
Mhm.
topics that are great because that has happened before. Like, I do know African Americans that feel that way.
Yeah.
Black people can't be racist because we didn't, build the
Mhm.
system of oppression. Okay. However, you have my personal view, you have other countries that are predominantly Black, predominantly African, and they are very racist against white
Mhm.
people, like South America, uh, Rwanda,
Mhm.
Uganda. Like these are like, and you have Somalian
Mhm.
pirates. I mean, I
Yeah,
know that's
and
kind of random,
I'm
but
definitely looking forward to the conversation that we're gonna
yes.
have about, colonization, colonialism, and everything like that. We do
No.
need to wrap up in just a few minutes, though. So I just want to thank everybody, for tuning in. This was such a great conversation. Thank you, for everyone who shared their comments. If we didn't respond to your comment during the live video, we're gonna go back into the comments on Facebook. We'll continue the conversation there. And so next week we're going to keep talking about white privilege, but we're going to focus more on that aspect of it within the mental health setting and some of what we've seen and what we've experienced and everything like that. So
Yes.
we'll continue the conversation next week, next Thursday, same time. So make sure that you guys
Are
tune in.
there because we love it. We love to see you.
Yeah,
We want to see
yeah.
everyone.
We
Come
want to
talk
see
with
you
us.
guys tune in, share your comments. This is Racial Perceptions, where literally we're just talking about our perceptions of these kinds of things. We
You are safe
purposely,
here. You can say
yeah,
whatever you'd like,
yeah,
and we'll hear that with open
hmm
ears and open
hmm
minds. And
yeah. And I was gonna say, we purposely left out data, statistics, numbers, and everything like that out of it. We're leaving, big topics about politics out of it because we really want to hear your perceptions, not just sharing numbers and not just giving you facts because, you know,
we're not here to change your
right,
mind. We're not
right.
here to sway you. We're not here to
hmm
say, "Oh, well, this statistic." No, this
hmm
isn't. This isn't about that. We want to hear what you
hmm
think,
We just
and
want to have a conversation.
yeah, we want to have that. We want to have the talk,
Yep,
the
basically.
convo.
Yep. All right. Well, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. This was our show for tonight. Join us again next week. We'll be looking forward to it. Bye, everyone. Bye, Cortessa.
Bye. See you next week.
Bye.